Well, hello everybody. Today I want to talk a little bit about redstone. And just a quick disclaimer, I am not a redstone expert or a redstone wizard. That being said, I do understand it pretty well, and just like anything else, if you understand it, you can appreciate it a little bit more. You know, like football, when I watch a football game, I know what's going on, I understand how the game is played. Am I any good at football? Definitely not. Same thing with like guitar. I know how to play guitar. I could play a couple of songs. Am I really great on the guitar? Not so much. So with redstone, what I want to do is just talk about some of the principles, some of the rules, some of the components, so that you guys have an idea of what they do. And then when you see a redstone build or think about a problem that could be solved with redstone, you'll kind of know how to think it through. So let's start at the very beginning. So redstone is basically just a bunch of components and a system for automating things. Redstone dust is kind of the wiring, and then there are a bunch of different things that do different things, and we'll talk through some of those. Certain things you can click on, so like redstone dust, you can have this plus symbol, or you can have just a dot. Comparator, you can click on it. Repeater, you can click on it. So different components have different options, and we'll go through a lot of those. So fundamentally, when you look at a redstone contraption, it's just sort of an if this, then that. So if I push this button, this redstone lamp comes on. Super simple. And when you want to build something with redstone, that's the way to kind of think about it. If this, then that. What is the if going to be, and what do you want the that to be? You usually start with the that. I want a light to come on. So how do I do that? So you need to kind of reverse engineer it. So redstone basically involves a power source, and then that signal travels to different components. Redstone has a distance of 15 blocks. So this is a redstone torch. And if we look at the first block, that has a power of 15. And then as we go along, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then we have a lamp here that is being powered by that. If we go one more block, you can see there's no power there. And so this lamp is not on. So a redstone signal can travel 15 blocks. Now, if we want that signal to go further than 15 blocks, there is a block called a repeater. And a repeater will take that signal, turn it into 15 again, and start it over. So that is one of the functions of a repeater. So a couple other fun things with redstone signals. Here we have a signal of 15 that's flowing out, and you'll notice it's going into this block. So this block is powered, and this lamp is sitting here on because it is receiving power. But this lamp is not on. That is because the redstone dust is not pointed into it. Now, if I was to take this signal and do that, now the dust is pointed into the lamp and it is on. So that is one thing to be aware of, is that just because there is redstone next to something doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be powered. The only exception is this new block, the target block. One of its special capabilities is it will pull a signal in from the side and move that signal over. So this used to be a little bit trickier. You had to have a repeater and a little bit more space. So a target block is very useful for that. But that's one thing to be aware of. The other thing to notice is the signal comes into this block, but it doesn't come out of this block. So this block is what they call soft powered, meaning there is power running into this. So this block is powered, and we can see that because the lamp is on here. But a soft powered block does not have enough juice to rebroadcast the signal. Now, one way around that is we can put a repeater here. Now this block is what we call hard powered. It is getting a full 15 signal, so it can push that signal on as though it was basically like a redstone block. Conversely, since there is some power here, we can use a repeater to pull the signal out of there, re-strengthen it, and broadcast it off using the repeater. So that's one other use of the repeater, is to take a soft-powered block and move a signal out of it. There are a couple of just natural redstone sources. So a redstone block, it makes a signal. And a redstone torch just naturally make a signal. So if you put those next to a line of redstone, it will power something. And then there are a bunch of blocks and components that trigger a signal. So for example, a button. If I push a button, it creates a signal and pushes that on. Or a pressure plate. If I step onto that, it will send a signal. A observer, when it notices this space in front of it change, it will create a signal. So notice when I place the block, it sends a signal, and when I break the block, it sends a signal. And then another thing is there are blocks like the comparator that can measure the signal in this. So this guy has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stacks of diamonds in it. So we're getting a little bit of power. And then if I was to put one more stack in there, then we get a light. So this comparator is measuring how full this is and sending out a signal based on that. And there's all kinds of things that you can measure. So for example, like a cauldron, here you can see we have no signal. If I put some water in there, the comparator can tell this is full, and so it sends out a signal. If I take some water out of there, we diminished the signal. So now you see we're only getting a 2. Now we're only getting 1. And now we're getting none. Another example is an item frame. This item can spin, and so as I turn it, you'll notice that the signal increases. Now the comparator is probably the most misunderstood block, and it basically does 3 different things. One is that it measures how much stuff is in a container. Whether it's a chest or a cauldron or a beehive, it can measure how full that thing is. The other thing that a comparator does is it compares signals. So if you send a signal into the back of the comparator, where the 2 little mini torches are, it will compare that signal to the signal coming in the side, and then give us an output resulting from that. So as an example, if the signal coming in the back is more, and the signal coming in the side is less, whatever this signal is, it'll just pass it through. Now, if the signal on the side is more and the signal on the back is less, when it compares them, it goes, this is more, no signal will come out. So that's one, when it's in comparison mode, one way to use a comparator is to compare the 2 signals coming from the back and the side. I can show you real quick here. So here is a torch, which we know is putting out a signal of 15. So 15, 14, 13 coming into the comparator. And then here we have 15, 14, 13, 12, 11. So this one is more. There's more signal coming in the back than in the side, so that signal gets passed on. Now if I flip this switch, now this is creating a signal of 15. So we go 15, 14 going in the side, and again 15, 14, 13 coming in the back. So now the side is stronger, and as you can see, it has disabled that. So if the signal coming in the side is smaller, lets the signal go through. If the signal coming in the side is bigger, cuts it off. So that's one way to use a comparator. And then the third way to use a comparator is what they call subtraction mode. So before we were in comparison mode, which is the natural default, if you click this switch and make that first little torch there red, it is in subtract mode. And basically what it is doing there is taking the signal coming in the back and subtracting the signal coming in the side. So here we have 15 coming in the back, and here we have 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10 coming in the side. So 15 minus 10 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is what subtract mode does, is it takes the signal coming in the back and subtracts the signal coming in the side, outputting the result. So subtracting, comparing, and measuring, super, super handy block. There are lots of other input devices as well. For example, there's a daylight sensor, and it basically gives a signal depending on what time of day it is. So if you want something to only happen at noon or only happen at sundown, this is a great way to do that. A tripwire can detect if the player or a mob or an item passes over a string and send a signal based on that. A target block, in addition to pulling a signal sideways, can detect if it is struck with an arrow or other projectile and will give a signal depending on how close you are to a bullseye. So a bullseye will give you a 15 signal, or if you're out here, you might get a 5 or a 6 signal. So yeah, really interesting block in that regard. And so when you're thinking about building something, you have to kind of realize that different components do slightly different things. So for example, here we have a door. And if I push a button, what do we think will happen? Door opens, door closes. That makes perfect sense. Now, if I have a lever and I use that to open the door, I flip the lever and the door stays open. So 2 different inputs give us slightly different behaviors. This one, if I want to close the door, I'm going to have to flip the lever again. Where this one, it only gives a short signal and then turns itself off. Really important to consider what kind of input do you want for your device. Let me show you a slightly more advanced demonstration here. So here I have a dispenser, and the dispenser has a bucket of water in it. And then I have some redstone that's just running around to the back there. Now, if I flip a lever, signal comes around, hits the dispenser, and it dispenses the water. That's great. Now, if I turn this off, what will happen? Nothing. A dispenser only activates when it receives a signal. So if I send another signal, then it turns the dispenser off. And then I can flip the lever again. So if I want the water to come out and the water to stop coming out, I have to flip it again, flip it again, because I wanted to send two signals. Now with the button, if I push a button, dispenses, and then if I push the button again, it stops dispensing. So unlike the switch or the lever here, this guy turns himself off. I push it, signal goes, and the signal stops. Push it again, the signal goes, and the signal stops. So a button in this case is actually a little bit more useful compared to the lever. Now, let me show you another example here. When I push this button, the signal comes around here, goes up and into the back of this dispenser. Now, if I add this little loop here, where basically it's just running into some repeaters, what do we think will happen then? Signal comes through, and then it turns itself off. So I didn't even have to push this twice. I pushed it once and the water came out, and then the water stopped coming out. And what happened was the signal came through just like last time, turned this guy on, and then the signal also goes this way. And one aspect of a repeater is you can set how much delay. So normally a repeater takes a couple of ticks, and you can add an additional tick and delay the signal a little bit. So this signal comes through here, hits the dispenser. Signal also takes this scenic route and goes really slow, and then comes around and hits this. So it essentially gets two signals. One, it's off. Here it comes around again, and off it goes. So using something like this, you can actually create two signals. Now you might have noticed that I had a repeater here as well. If I didn't have that repeater, I'll let you see what happens. So basically what's happening is the signal comes around, lights all of this up. Comes around again, lights all this up. Comes around again, lights all this up. And so we have essentially created a little clock where the signal just keeps getting passed around. Now, when I had a repeater here, repeaters only let signals go in one direction. So when the signal comes through, comes around, and it can't turn left, it can only turn right. So repeaters are one-way roads, basically. So they can be useful in that regard, too. So I want to talk about one more component real quick, and that is the Redstone Torch. As we talked about earlier, it basically creates its own redstone signal. Now, if it's sitting on a block and we send power into that block, you'll notice the torch turns off. And we call this inverted. The signal has inverted. So that is one of the interesting properties about a redstone torch. If a block that it is attached to gets power, it turns off. So how can we use that? So here I have a sticky piston with a block attached to it, and if I push this button, you'll notice it moves it over. It's like that. Now let's say this is a door, and right now the door is open. But I don't want my door to be open all the time. I want my door to be closed all the time unless I push the button to open it. So how can we turn this around, essentially? Well, what we could do basically, I have a redstone torch here that is sending a signal into the dust and then into this piston. So the piston is firing right now and the door is closed. So now if I push this button, what will happen is we'll send power to this block. It turns off the torch temporarily, which retracts the block. And so now we have a button that opens the door rather than closing the door. So Redstone Torch is extremely useful. Now you might be saying to yourself, that's not a lot of time to get through a door. And I would agree with you. So there is a such thing as a pulse extender. So right now the pulse lasts 10 redstone ticks. That's how long a stone button sends a signal. So what we could do is we could take a couple of comparators. So I can put them like that, and then a couple more redstone dust. So what's going to happen here is the signal will go off like it normally does, but it'll also go through this comparator who will do the comparing thing and go, this is stronger, send it on. This is stronger, send it on. And then the signal will degrade a little bit, come back in, send it on, send it on. It'll degrade a little bit, send it on, send it on. And so this will extend the signal, but it will slowly fade out. I'll show you what happens here. The door will stay open quite a lot longer. So that's plenty of time to get through it. And then if you watch the comparators, you'll slowly see the signal fade out here. And so that's a real simple pulse extender. There is a such thing as a pulse shortener as well, if you just want like a 1-tick pulse for a lava blade or something like that. I'll let you guys do the research on that on your own. All right, the last thing I want to talk about is something I mentioned over there, and that's clocks. This in front of me here is something called the Etho hopper clock. And this was invented by a guy named Etho, and it is a brilliant little contraption. Very, very useful. Basically what it is it's two hoppers that are facing into each other. And normally when you have two hoppers that are facing into each other, the items will just bounce back and forth. But what we've done here is we've put a redstone block so this hopper is effectively locked. So all of the items will flow from one hopper over to the next. Now as soon as the items are all over here, this comparator will turn off for a split second, which will cause the redstone block to move over. That locks the other hopper, and then all the items will flow to the other direction. So what you get ultimately is a redstone block moving back and forth, back and forth. And every time it lines up with this redstone line, we get a signal. So let me put some things in here. I'm going to put 20 items in here, and you'll notice that they start flowing over. And then as soon as they flow over, you'll see the comparator flash off just for a split second. Now they're flowing over again, and then this comparator will turn off for just a split second. There we go. And so these pistons are pushing this block back and forth, back and forth. And every time it lines up here, we get a signal, just like that. So this is really awesome for something like a mob farm where you want, it to periodically flush the mobs out, or maybe you have a farm where you want it to auto-harvest every so often. This kind of clock, we only have 20 items in here. You could load this thing up with a ton of items, and this would only happen then every few minutes. So this is a really, really cool design. Let me replace the light with a dropper, and let me grab some more items here. So now we have a dropper, and the clock is moving back and forth. So the items are flowing from one hopper to the other, and when this block moves over, this will drop. Just like that. Now this is cool, and it's obviously working, but what if our goal was to empty this as quickly as we could? That's not very effective then. Let me break this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a observer right here. And like I mentioned over there, what an observer does is it watches this space here to see if anything changes. So if some sugarcane grows, this guy will send out a redstone signal. Or if we had a line of dust here and some signal went through here, he would send off a redstone signal. Or if we were to place a block here, he'll send off a redstone signal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put another observer here. And so what this guy's going to do when he sees that is go, oh, you're new. And he's going to send off a redstone signal. And then this observer is going to go, hey, you just sent off a redstone signal. I'm going to send off a redstone signal. And then this guy's going to go, oh, you just sent off a redstone signal? I'm going to send off a redstone signal. And this just keeps happening over and over. Now, every time this guy sends off a redstone signal, it's going to hit this dropper. And so I'll show you what it looks like. You get a really fast clock, just over and over. And you can see we tore through that really, really quickly. So this is a really simple, very cool little clock. And you can see it's only 2 blocks. So clocks don't have to be complicated. It really just depends on what your application is, but they're very, very cool. So I personally find creating redstone contraptions to be really fun. Sometimes it can be frustrating, but most of the time it's really fun to try to figure out how can I make this happen. And I rely a lot on videos. You know, I don't think it's necessary to reinvent the wheel every single time. You know, if there's a great way to do something, I look it up. You know, for example, like an item filter in a storage system. I don't need to create a new item filter because there are really, really simple and good ones that people have created. And when I look at one, I can understand how it works because I understand these basic redstone principles. And so I encourage you to do the same. You know, if you want to create a clock, learn how to make an Etho hopper clock. Once you know how to do that, it is so handy and you'll use it way more than you think you will. Same thing with like a monostable circuit or a T flip-flop, things like that. You'll use them so much. There's some really, really great resources on YouTube. Mumbo Jumbo is probably the king of redstone, and he comes up with these really amazing contraptions that are just super impressive. You don't have to do that kind of thing. If you just want to figure out how do I open a door, how do I move my stuff from here to there, how do I turn the lights off, things like that, that can be all automated. And like I said, it can be a lot of fun. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you had fun. I hope you found it informative. Please like and subscribe if you want to follow along, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.